So we're gonna begin. Welcome. So let's get in the zone a little bit. Yeah. I'm just showing you where we are. We're on January 31st, so we're doing double afterlife. Then we'll get on to we'll see where we are after this. I hope we'll be able to move to Jewish meditation next week. Okay, that's I like to do that. Skulas, spirits, ghosts, angels. The last one, 21st, was spiritual teaching. So I think I kind of grabbed that for the afterlife. Okay, so that's kind of where we are right now. What? Hi, Irina. I'm moving quickly through this. This is gonna make you a little dizzy at home.
And which one are we doing today? I thought we were doing the spooky show.
So today we're doing. Let me just make this bigger. One second. Today we're continuing the afterlife. If you consider that spooky, then we're continuing with the spooky stuff. You think it's spooky? Okay. So here are our topics today. Here's our at the afterlife part 2. Last week we got into the background to the afterlife. Now we're gonna jump in. I'm kind of excited for this. It's interesting text. It's like a lot of interesting things in here about what's going to happen afterwards. So here's the overall structure of what we're doing. Who are we really? Afterlife for the body and soul, afterlife for the soul, Gehenna, hell. I took out reincarnation. I put in revival of the dead. Maybe we'll get into reincarnation in our spirits class, okay? Because I don't think we're gonna have time to get to that today. And if we have time to connect it to Jewish burial customs, we have a lot to go through. So I just want to begin. I want to begin just by trying to put people at home somewhere. I like to be able to see the people at home. Okay, just want to show you before we start. This is a text I've been using for this class, The Way of God. This is an awesome book. If you're spiritually inclined, this is a good book to read. It's clear, it's super organized, and it's got a lot of spiritual concepts. It's written in the 18th century by Moshe Chaim Luzzatto. He wrote poetry, he wrote plays, he wrote books on logic. He was a mystic. He wrote the central book on Jewish ethics called Mesilat Yesharim, The Path of the Just. Very important figure. This book's very organized. It's clear, and I took a lot from here for this class. Another book that's a wonderful book by Rabbi Aryeh Kaplan. If you ever heard of him, great. If not, you should know about him. He translated a lot of our mystical works from Hebrew to English. So this book is called Immortality, Resurrection, and the Age of the Universe. You can find this on Amazon. I linked to it on our slides. Okay.
Is he still living?
No, but there's a video of him on YouTube if you want to see what he was like.
He died really
He
young.
died very young, before age 40. I think like age.
Yeah.
Really?
He made it to who's who in physics. He was
Guessing probably.
Yeah, he was lectured on physics, and he translated immense amount of material. Anyway, here's one more text. This to you. It's a great book also. It's Illuminating Jewish Thought, Explorations of Free Will, the Afterlife, and the Messianic Era. So here's some texts that could be helpful. They helped me prepare this one.
Like a wing in your house of all this mystical stuff.
Yeah. It's like a whole wall. That's joking. All right. So what I want to show you, I want to start with, I just want to show you the Rambam's 13 principles of faith. Okay. Why am I doing this? I just want to show you that one of them is the belief in the afterlife. This didn't come out as clearly as I thought it would. Looks a little bit weird, but the first one is you believe that God's the creator. The second one is that God is one. I mean, there's not 3 gods or 2 gods. It's one God. The next one is God's not physical. Okay? God is first and last, meaning there's not going to be someone who created God, and there's not going to be another God after God. God is the first in line. We pray to God, not to anybody else. It's about prophecy. Okay, a few texts about prophecy in the Torah. Then he talks about the afterlife at the end here. God knows all deeds and thoughts of humanity. Okay, 11 is, I believe with perfect faith that he rewards those who keep his commandments and punishes those who transgress them. Number 12, I believe in the coming of the Mashiach. Anim Amin. Anybody know this song? Be'emuna shlema. So, which one do you know?
That's the most traditional.
Anim Amin. Be'emuna shlema. Beviat HaMashiach.
I was just sitting around waiting for him.
Yes, good. So
Yeah.
you did the right thing. So we're supposed to wait for the Mashiach every day. That song is actually the Hebrew version. This is the translation of that song. I took it from here. That means I believe with perfect faith in the coming of the Messiah, and even though he may delay, I will wait for his coming. So that's the 12th one. Here's the 13th one. I believe with perfect faith that the dead will live again. At the time of the Creator's choosing, blessed be He, His name, and exalted be His. What is that? Mentioned forever and all time. So very interesting, right?
Wait, did you say I believe the devil would live again?
I believe the dead.
The dead.
I mean, the devil is already living.
We know what you're thinking about over there. All right. So, okay. Okay.
I thought you said devil.
The devil?
No.
I said devil?
No. I
It
think
sounded
so.
that.
All right, so let me take it back. Start over. I believe that the dead will live again. Okay. Now, I thought I said the dead, but if I didn't, that's what I meant. And what is it? Why am I showing you this? Number one, it's good to know these 13 principles of faith. They're very central. It's also interesting to think that like the revival of the dead, it seems like such a foreign idea, like that we're going to die, and at a certain point, we're going to be brought back to life. That made it into the top 13. I would imagine he might have said something like, I believe in the afterlife. But he specifically said the revival of the dead. So it's worth thinking about, like, what does that mean?
Does that mean physically as well
Physically.
as spiritually?
Yeah. Yeah. So we're going to try to understand what that means. Like, what does it mean that there's going to be revival of the dead, that people are going to come back to life? Like, yeah.
Can I ask-
That's afterlife, that's what he.
Yeah.
Not gonna-
What is his source?
Oh, the revival for what?
Is the ripest source for resurrection of the dead?
Well, I think his source is from the Mishnah. The Mishnah says anyone who doesn't believe in Sanhedrin says anyone who doesn't believe in the revival of the dead doesn't have a place in the world to come.
Right.
That's a pretty strong source. It's an older source. Where did they get that from? That's a good question. But he's based himself on an early Tannaitic Mishnaic source. So, yeah, did that help you with your heresy or?
A little.
Okay. All right. So I want to show you that. It's still, I mean, it means as an introduction. Okay. Let's take a look. Okay. This is what I want to ask first before we jump into the sources. Okay. This class is basically going to try to understand who the real self is. What does that mean? Okay. So we talked about this last year in my course, but this is like a little bit of a different direction. I'm Eli, Rabbi, Father, whatever. Lots of titles. But like, what is my essence? Am I just a soul borrowing this body? Like, well, what am I? Am I really just a soul? Or am I a soul in a body? Like, is my body wound up in who I really am? What do you think? I don't know. Yeah.
I think you're a soul.
Okay. Thank you. You are too.
Well,
Um,
I'm soul at that, Baruch Hashem.
thank you.
But, there's a rabbi, have you ever heard of this Rabbi Seinfeld? He's
Yes.
related.
To Rabbi
to
Kramer.
Jared.
Rabbi Kramer.
No, I'm being serious, kid. He's
Ah, you're being
related to
serious.
Jared,
Okay.
But he's given some shirim, and one of the shirim he gave was, are you a soul? Or do you have a soul? And the end of the premise was, it's not that you have a soul, you are a soul.
Okay. Anybody want to offer the other direction that like I am not just my soul, I am this whole entity? Maybe
Maybe dies, your physical body, when you die, your physical goes in the ground, but your neshama elevates.
So that's a strong argument to say that like my real essence is my soul. Anybody on Zoom? Yeah, Janet. Sorry, someone gets included. I want to include Zoom for a second.
Yeah, I think you are a body, mind, and soul entity. Currently, you are a spirit experiencing yourself in human form. But your totality, your permanency, is that of a soul. You're just experiencing yourself in human form temporarily.
Okay. So I think people, yeah, Sandy and
I
Shay.
was gonna say that I think your body is the vessel of the soul to help you perform these mitzvot to help your soul grow and do what it needs to do. So I think you need both.
You're gonna say the same.
Yeah, that and that, Nora said that the body, the soul makes a aliyah,
Goes up, yeah.
goes up. But whatever, but it seems that if the spirit of who you are lives on through other people and through what you've done, that your soul really still is here.
So yeah, very interesting. Yeah, that's powerful too. Yeah, so that's good Vartara for like people in mourning, it's like kind of, but it's also true. So this is going to be a debate between our commentators in earlier generations, and it's going to impact how they view the afterlife, really. Okay, here's the main crux of here's the main summary. Rambam, and the other rationalists along with him, Rabbi Yehuda Levi also, they say that our essence is our soul. And our soul is basically like our thinking, a part of our soul that engaged in spirituality and thinking and learning Torah. And so that is our essence. And when we think about the afterlife is going to be a situation where our soul will be in its highest expression. And so it'll just be the soul, meaning what we're used to often, like when you see in the movies, the usual explanation where a person dies, they go to heaven, and then they're in heaven forever. That's the Rambam's explanation. He does include the revival of the dead, and we'll see how he includes that in there. But the overall trajectory is we die, and then our soul, our real self, is manifest in heaven, and that's his approach. Another direction, which we're going to see right now, says something different. Okay, so let's take a look at what they say. So we're going to compare these two approaches for the first part of the class. Then we're going to talk about approaches to hell, like Gehenna, and like what happens there, and see there's different takes on that as well. All right, so here's a text, the Ramban and the Ramchal. Okay, they are Kabbalists, mystics. Okay, the Ramban is a medieval mystic. The Ramchal lived in the 18th century. They basically, and other mystics along with them, they basically say that our essence is twofold. We are body and soul. And so and that's what happened in the Garden of Eden, the very beginning of creation. Humans were created with body and soul, and we are going to die. Our souls will go up to heaven, but the final destination is for them to be reunited once more. That's revival of the dead. The revival of the dead, according to the mystics, is like forever. Like the souls are going to go to heaven, then they're going to come back down and reunite with the body, and they will live in unity, like forever.
Where are you gonna put everybody?
It's a good question. It's a good question. No, it's very interesting.
Right.
There's a lot of questions connected to it. Like let's say you believe in reincarnation. So like which one of you is gonna be here? Which version? But there's a lot of questions. Or like who are you going to be living with? Let's say you married a few times. Are you coming back with your final wife? Or... Oh God, okay, I don't want to cause anybody. Yeah, Rick.
This may sound a little.
I have a thought.
Hold 1 second. Rick's gonna ask a question and then I'll come back to you.
This may
Thanks.
sound kind of crazy, but I've always wondered about the expanse of the universe and the possibility that.
You hear Rick, by the way? Not really.
So.
He wonders about the expanse of the universe.
About the expanse of the universe, is quite possible that your soul and your body your soul may not necessarily live here or go up to heaven, but maybe spread across wherever God puts everybody, because someone just asked the question, what do you do with everything?
Very
And you need a
interesting.
more expansive
So he's
space.
saying that, Rick's saying that it could be that the soul expands to other regions of our world with the body.
Well,
Yeah.
I think that's the major question, and we were all saying that what's gonna happen to the body and the soul are gonna reunite.
We don't
The
know what
question
the
is,
boundary.
where are they gonna reunite?
So Rick's asking, where are they going to reunite?
So, what's that?
We don't know what the boundaries
Well, we
are.
don't.
Yeah.
But
So that's all-
the question always becomes, why do we have a universe? What are those planets doing up there?
That's a great question.
Okay,
So that
and
Rick's,
you have all these frames of energy that identify science.
so Rick's asking why
did
we have
God-
planets, why,
did God
that's-
create all those
that's a
strands of
great
energy?
question, but not for this class. But that's a good question. All right, Diane, that's a really good question. Diane, you're gonna.
I don't know if anybody's heard of this book before. I've been here before. It's I think I mentioned it last time. When Souls of the Holocaust Return, it's by Sarah Yocheved Rigler. She lives in Israel. Anyway, her thought on this, based on her research, is that there are only so many souls in the universe. I'm just giving you her thought. I'm not just something to think about. So many souls in the universe, and that they continue to come back until they're perfected. And maybe when the Messiah comes, our perfected self will come back.
Good. So that's, thank you. That's the topic of reincarnation, which that keeps getting mentioned, but I'm kind of staying a little bit away from it, but I will get back to it, okay? Let's hold for a little bit, okay? Let's hold for a little, let's move a little bit through our slideshow here. So I'm gonna skip these slides. These are basically, this is a source from Rabbi Ishmael, from the Midrash. Earlier texts, like 1,500 years ago or more. He says that in the future days, the king, he placed he brings a parable here, but basically that the body and soul are both going to be judged together in the future. That's one opinion. In that same midrash, we have another opinion. I'm trying to show you the ancestors to these later opinions. This is the earlier text. This text says, Rabbi Chia taught in the future world, God will overlook the body and only judge the soul. So the other text said that God's going to judge the body and the soul. This says they're just going to judge the soul. That's the common understanding that people have of the world to come. The soul will complain, master the world. Both of us have sinned together. Why do you leave the body and single me out for judgment? God will then reply, the body comes from below, a place of sin, but you come from on high, a place where sin does not exist. Therefore, you alone are worthy to be judged. Okay, so that's a text which seems to say, go by this approach where it's going to only be the soul afterwards. Okay. So this is Rabbi Chia, and this is Rabbi Ishmael. Okay, this is an earlier text. This is from the Midrash. Rabbi Ishmael taught a parable. I'll just tell it to you. The king had an orchard that had lovely first fruits. The king placed upon it guards, one lame and one blind. Okay, he said to them, "Take care of these lovely first fruits." After some days, the lame one said to the blind one, "I see lovely first fruits in the orchard." The blind one said to him, "Bring them and we will eat." The lame one said to the blind one, "I would if I were able to walk." The blind one said, "I would if I were able to see." The lame one rode upon the back of the blind one, and they ate the first fruits. And they went and returned each man in his own place. After some days, the king entered that orchard and said to them, "What are these? Where are the beautiful fruits?" The blind one said to him, "My lord king, I would were I able to see." The lame one said to him, "I would were able to walk." The king understood what they had done. He placed the lame one on the back of the blind one and said, they began to walk. Thus in the future, God will call to the heavens above to bring the soul and to the earth to bring the body and judge them together. So the basic idea is your body and your soul, your whole self did mitzvot, your whole self did wrong things. So your whole self, body and soul, should be judged or should be accountable. These are two different approaches, and this is the earlier versions of them. And this debate's going to continue through our tradition, through the rationalists, through the mystics, and so it's just good. And it goes back to this understanding of self and who is the self. And so we're going to see how it's going to play out with their understandings of the next world. We're going to see everyone agrees on a lot of things. There's this component they don't agree on. So just hold on and go with me, and You'll understand a little bit more. Here's just a picture of someone riding a wagon. That's commonly like a common metaphor that's used. Like the soul, according to this approach, this is the real essence, and this is just a vehicle to get through the world. But the soul is the real self. Okay? All right, so let's go on to this for the first approach. Okay, the first approach says that the afterlife. I'm bringing you the more complicated one first. Okay, the one that's not intuitive for you. Okay. And then we'll get to the more intuitive one, which is when one dies, one goes straight to heaven and just stays there, except for intermediary stage of revival of the dead. But then you head back up again. Okay, we're going to see the revival of the dead makes this whole complicated, right? Like many of us, like from the movies or from culture, from our society, what we understand of life and death is basically you're alive and you die. We have this whole thing of the revival of the dead. We saw it as one of the 13 principles. We have to figure out how that fits into this. Okay, so this is the system according to this approach. This is the Ramban and the Ramchal and other mystics. Okay, the first stage is our world. Olam Hazeh means this world. There's the soul and the body together. That's us right now. Okay, the soul and the body together. Okay, the next stage is once one dies, one goes to the world of the souls. The one soul goes up there. It's a waiting room. It's a waiting room. What happens there? There's Gan Eden, there's Gan Gehenna. There's hell, heaven, and hell. Okay? That's where the souls are. What happens later on, the last stage is Tchiyat HaMeitim. That's Olam Haba. That's how he understands Olam Haba, the concept of Olam Haba. That's what it is according to the Ramban. And the next world, the next world is when the soul and the body reunite. This intermediary stage of the soul going to heaven, that's to help elevate the soul, purify the body through death so they can decompose, the body can decompose, it can be restructured, and then the soul can be elevated higher, and then they can come back together and live like it was in the Garden of Eden. The Garden of Eden, Adam and Eve lived there in an ideal state. And all they had to do was a few mitzvot, and they would have gone up to extremely high levels. But they sinned, and that's where we are now. So we have to pick ourselves not only up to the level of Adam and Eve, but to do what they didn't do, which is to do the mitzvot or whatever spiritual work we need to do to go even higher. So that's like the structure of this approach. Okay, yeah.
So, what would one consider the qualifications to go to Gan Eden instead of Gehenna?
So we kind of talked about that in our last class. Like what will be some things?
Mitzvot.
Well, we talked about several things. We talked about doing mitzvot. We talked about being connected to God. We talked about being true to yourself. That's also a big one. Meaning, like, I would say there could be other things as well, like living your true self. That is, when you manifest your true self, you're manifesting your soul. And manifesting your soul, you are ensuring yourself a place to live authentically, like when in a soul world. Also, to be spiritual, to be connected to like to more more things of value versus things that are of fleeting value. Because we're going to talk about that actually when we get to the part on Gehenna on hell. We're going to see.
Rabbi, this is Lynn. It's also a matter of becoming more pure. So it's like purification of both the body and the soul, which is something that, we talk about all the time. But
which is purification? Which stage?
Both the elevation of the soul and the body decomposing and being cleansed and then being ready for another state.
It's weird. I can't hear. It's kind of confusing. Oh, it's better. Okay. Thanks, Lynn. So that's a good segue to a few texts I want to show you for this approach. Okay. Once you get through these texts, I think it'll be like a little bit clearer. And I actually think that this approach makes sense in several ways. I'll share with you the other approach, but all of them again share in common that when one dies, one does go to the world of souls. Okay, one goes to Olam Haba, and also everybody agrees that there's also a purification stage of hell, Gehenna. Okay, everyone agrees that. The question is, is that stage where you're in the soul world going to continue forever? Or is there going to be a stage where you come back down and you reunite with the body forever? That's a debate, but everyone agrees that in heaven and hell, the question is the last stage going to be, they're going to be reunited or not? This approach says that they are. So here's a little bit of the background connection to this approach. Says when Adam was first, this is from Derech Hashem, this book that I showed you. When Adam was first created, he was precisely in the state that we have discussed until now, composed of two equal opposites, the body and the soul. His environment contained both good and evil, and he was balanced between the two to choose whichever he wished. The appropriate thing for him to have done would have been to choose the good. Okay? Had he done so, his soul would have overcome his body and the spiritual would have dominated the physical. He would have then immediately attained perfection. It would have remained with him forever and with Eve. We are normally aware of the soul's existence only because it provides us with life and the ability to think. It is necessary to realize, however, that the soul also has another function, to purify man's physical body, gradually elevating it until it too can take pleasure from the perfection along with the soul. If Adam had not sinned, he would have been able to attain this total perfection. His soul would have purified his body step by step until he reached the level required to permanently partake of the everlasting bliss. So basically in the Garden of Eden, Adam and Eve were there. If they would have just done some mitzvot, they would have guarded and serviced the garden there, done some mitzvot, whatever they had to do, they would have gone up really high, but they didn't. So they were here. They didn't go up here. Instead, they went down here. So according to this approach, we have to bring ourselves back up here and hopefully get back up here afterwards. In order to get back up here, there has to be destruction. Like this body has to be destroyed at a certain point, like it has to die and come back so we can go to the higher level. So here's two more texts from this approach, and then we'll summarize it, okay? So here's why you need the revival of the dead, according to this approach. When Adam sinned, however, things were greatly changed. He could no longer earn perfection as easily as when he personally bore no responsibility for his deficiencies. Therefore, required to earn perfection was therefore doubled. Man must first bring himself and the world back to the state in which they existed before the first sin. Only then can he raise himself from that state to his destined level of perfection. Besides this, justice decreed that neither man nor the world will ever be able to arise to perfection while they're in their current fallen state. Because they remain in the spoiled, non-ideal condition, evil in the meantime has increased. Both must go through a stage of destruction before they can arrive at perfection. The soul cannot purify the body until the body dies and deteriorates and a new structure is composed, that the soul can enter and purify. It was therefore decreed that man should die and be brought back to life. This is the concept of the resurrection of the dead. Okay, so that's the second source. Basically, because of Adam's sin, there need to be a certain stage where the body dies, and the soul goes back up to heaven so it can get recharged. Then you come back with a better body and a better soul, and then they're able to reunite, like in the Garden of Eden of old. And so everything we're doing according to this in our lives is basically to help elevate ourselves, elevate our souls so that we can experience that bliss when they reunite later on. You can also experience the bliss when the soul leaves the body in the world of souls. And so hold on for one more second. Here's the last text, and then we can chat about it. This is the soul world, okay? Since it has been decreed that man must die, body and soul must remain separated until the time comes for them to be reunited. During this period of separation, an appropriate place must exist for each of the two separate parts. The body thus returns to its element, decomposing and losing its form. Since the body originated from the dust, it must return to it. And this is what God told Adam. You are dust, and to dust you must return. The body must undergo decay and decomposition, remain in the earth for an appropriate time, and finally be reconstructed anew so that the soul can re-enter it. During this intermediate time, however, the soul also needs a place. It is for this reason that God prepared a soul world. That's Gan Eden, or Olam Neshamot, the soul world. When a soul leaves the body, it enters this soul world. So where are our loved ones right now? According to this, they're in the soul world. Everybody agrees that they're in the soul world. Even you're going to see the next approach, because they say the soul world continues forever. This soul world is a waiting room. It's in an intermediate stage. But everyone agrees that they're there at this point. And remains there in a state of rest while the body undergoes what it must. During this period, the soul experiences sublime delight, very much like that which was bestowed on the individual later in the period of genuine reward. Its level in the soul world is also determined by its accomplishments, just as is the ultimate reward. The true perfection destined for those worthy of it, however, is not attained by either the body or soul alone, but by the complete man, okay, the complete person. Who's that? Consisting of both of them, the body and soul, combined after the resurrection. So let me just show you this slide here. So let me just summarize that, and I'll just field some questions, and I'll talk about some pros and cons of this approach. Okay. Basically, this approach says that there's a time for serving God, for manifesting ourselves, for connecting to good things. We talked about in last class that every good thing that you do builds your next world. So it's not an all or nothing thing. And those good things can include many things, many forms of doing good things. Torah mitzvot, obviously. So the more good we do, the more we build our spiritual selves. That spiritual self is we get to experience that in its fullness after we die, after we pass away. According to this approach, we benefit from this in the soul world. And then eventually when the soul and the body come back together in a rare type of connection that we don't know about, because we don't know what it's like to have a spiritual body. We don't know what that is. Okay. But the soul and the body will be reunited at a later stage. And then that'll be the ideal situation. The ideal, like that's when the great reward will be experienced. And I guess people will come back together. They'll be together again in this world, in a spiritual state, which is a very it's like a crazy idea, right? Anybody heard this before? Like this, so some of you have, but so this is that approach. Any questions on this before I want to share with you a thought on the revival of the dead to make it a little bit more logical for you. But before that, any questions or thoughts on this? Yeah. And on Zoom too. I'm just gonna.
I've heard this expounded before. And one thing I wondered about is the issue of, shall we say, reincarnation. In other words, that those people will believe in Gilgul and Neshamot.
Yeah.
You alluded to it a little before. How does that integrate at all with those ideas?
Yeah.
Or is that just something which you can't?
No, I mean, okay. People want to talk about reincarnation very badly in here. So it does, but it's going to take us really far off. So it does. Okay. Yeah. Anybody on Zoom want to ask a question for? I see Anne.
I had something.
Anne and Nadine, either one.
Okay. Go ahead, Nadine. Okay, I had something interesting happen when my father died. For months and months after, I used to see him standing in my hallway every day. And I said to my husband, do you think this has anything to do with he's not ready, his soul, maybe he isn't ready to go yet and he's still here? And he said he didn't know, but it was very strange happening, and it happened for months and months. And in fact, I said, I'm going to have to go to a shrink if I don't stop this. I can't stand it anymore. But when I moved, it stopped. So I don't know what it was about, but for months and months, I saw him standing there every day.
So,
and
thanks for sharing that.
maybe
That's
it had to do with afterlife of some
yeah.
kind.
So that's like another class of arts. Like we're building in stages. The other class is going to be spirits, and we could talk about reincarnation. But like, many of our texts do believe there's an interface between this world and the next world, right? Like, some of our customs are understood that way around death. We mentioned that last class, like the lighting of the Ner Neshama, the yahrzeit candle. Some say that it's to remind us of our loved ones. Some say that it's to create a type of spiritual connection and manifest a connection between the spiritual world and our world. Another example would be like Kaddish. Some say the Kaddish is to commemorate the soul. Some say it's to elevate the soul. Meaning that there's an interface between the spiritual and the physical. Like the Torah talks about how Moshe's face was, lit up completely. He was able to inhabit the spiritual in the physical world. So it's not like there's two realms that are completely disconnected. That would be an extreme version of it where one's loved one is like, visiting the individual. But there's stories like that in the Talmud. And in mystical texts, there's a lot of discussion around that, like of souls visiting or an individual's soul after they passed away, kind of like hovering over the body for the first 3 days, the first 30 days, still being around the first year. There's discussions around that. So a lot of our texts do talk, the Talmud talks about that. So it sounds weird, but that does appear in our text. I saw Anne wanted to ask.
Yeah, I got a little confused. When the soul comes back to the body, is it going back to its original body or a different body?
Great question. So when the soul comes back to the body, let's go back to this. When the soul comes back to the body, according to this approach, this world, the soul world, and then the soul body connection, it's going to come back to our bodies. Like according how this path explains itself, is that it comes back to our bodies in a reconstructed form, and inhabits them. Our bodies are going to be different at that time. They'll be like on a higher level, like in the time of Garden of Eden. So I don't know what that means exactly. Like I don't know what that means. I don't know if that means that it's a spiritual type of existence with a body. So I don't know what that means. Adam and Eve were supposed to get there. They were supposed to do what they had to do to like have that elevated state of the body, but they didn't succeed. What I want to do is I want to offer you one thought on revival of the dead that can help bring it closer to you. Okay, I have this at the very end of this, but I'll show it to you. Here's a revival of the dead fun question. All right. If a person remarries, who will be his wife or husband following resurrection? The first one, the second, or the neither? In the 7th section of Rav Saadia Gaon's book, he says, we do not know and do not need to exert ourselves to come up with an answer. Lucky you. All right. Will deformed people be resurrected with deformities, or will they be cured? Like let's say somebody was paralyzed throughout their life. Will they arise according to them in a paralyzed form? They say they'll be cured. What if nothing of the deceased body remains, right? Rav Saadia Gaon answered that nothing that exists in this world can entirely destroy any trace of a body. Even a fire merely separates the parts of a thing. That something of the original body remains. Very interesting idea. Lastly, according to those who believe in Gilgul Neshama, right, reincarnation, which body will be resurrected? Like let's say I've been here 7 times before. So which one of me is going to? So how it's commonly understood is that each resurrection, we said we're not going to talk about, we'll touch on it here. Each reincarnation, according to those who believe in it, each reincarnation fixes another part of you. So I am a part that, according to that, was not fixed in a previous reincarnation. So all the parts will come up with a different body. So it's a big soul that has different parts, really. Okay, so.
You're gonna have to shout out.
Yeah, we got a lot of questions here. Can we hold the questions for a little bit? I love the questions. I want to make sure we get through some of them or two. Okay, I appreciate it that everyone's interested. That's great. I want to show you. Okay, so I want to just show you some pros and cons to this approach, and then share with you the understanding of the revival dead that could be very interesting to you. Okay, by Rav Aryeh Kaplan. So some pros is that creation is a full cycle. We started out body and soul, we die, and then we come back to where we were supposed to be. The Garden of Eden. It's like there's something cyclical about this approach. Something maybe Lint. I don't know. Is it cyclical or it's something that comes back to where it was? So I guess cyclical. Our experiences allows the revival of the dead. Rambam listed the revival of the dead as one of the most important things. This explains why. Because that's the final stage, right? So it makes sense that this would be so important. This is the final stage. So that's why it's in the top 13, right? What's so difficult about it is like, what's going to be the purpose of the body in the future days? What's the body going to do? So that's a question. That's a difficulty. Also, it doesn't align with how many perceive the afterlife, like as a soul world alone. It also makes belief in the afterlife a bit more difficult because it's all a miracle. Like the afterlife is just completely this miraculous thing where it's the body and the soul come together. So that might be difficult to believe.
Pretty miraculous, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I know. All right, so I want to show you this text here, and then we'll go on to the next approach. But this is actually very interesting. So this is Rav Aryeh Kaplan in this book. And he says that, I mean, people talk about resurrection of the dead. It seems like a really foreign idea. Let me just make this a little bit smaller so I can see. A very foreign idea, but he says, hey, science, there's precedent within science to explain how the resurrection of the dead could happen in a scientific manner. So he says like this: instead of viewing this matter from a traditional viewpoint, let us for a moment explore the possibility of bringing a dead person back to life as a purely technological problem. The newly developed science of cloning, this is like maybe over 30 years ago or more, I don't know, comes into play here. As is well known, almost every cell in the body contains a full set of chromosomes, with all the genetic material needed to reconstruct the entire body. In the standard method of cloning, which has already been successfully tried with animals, the chromosomes of an unfertilized ovum are replaced with those of the cell to be cloned. If this ovum is then implanted in a womb, it will grow into precise genetic carbon copy of the chromosome donor. What if an amount of genetic material sufficient to reproduce a full set of chromosomes were to survive in a grave? Right? So let's say that revival of the dead isn't something that Hashem does. Let's say it's something that the scientists do. Let's say at a certain point, the scientists find a way to take the DNA and regenerate the body once more. That could be how the revival of the dead would happen in future days. So that's how he offering a way that it could happen. I mean, it sounds like a crazy thing, but maybe through science, it could create the body. What would be so special about it that God would give the soul? Because you can't, it's just going to say here. What if, it's just like this, cloning could then be done not only from a living person, but even from one long dead. Furthermore, there is no more reason why this process should have to take place in a natural womb. There's been much experimentation with artificial wombs. Okay, taking this one step further, the process could also be carried out with an artificial ovum or with some other mechanism, etc. In all this discussion, we speak only of the body. Even the most perfect clone, no matter how exact a carbon copy of the body it may be, does not contain the memories of the original donor. The memories that were in the dead person's brain are beyond the power of any technology to reproduce. This is guaranteed by the second law of thermodynamics. Thus, even if the body could be reconstructed technologically, the soul and its memories would have to be supplied by God Himself. That would be the miracle of the revival of the dead. Science helps us recreate the bodies. The miracle would be that God restores the soul into the body. So that could make it a little bit more, help us connect a little bit to this idea of the revival of the dead.
But it's illegal to clone humans.
Is this?
Right now,
Is this
yeah.
like
In America.
this almost sounds like a
Pleasing in China.
precursor to what Judaism would say to.
Tell me about what's going on in China.
I roll it in.
It's part of that broader discussion. Yeah. Yeah. All right. So I just wanted to show that to you. I want to show you that's a very interesting approach to it. Now I want to get back to like the standard way that most people think, which is a more linear approach, which is like not cyclical, but rather linear. Body, soul together, we die, and the soul goes up to the world of souls, and it stays there. That's the Rambam's approach, Maimonides. That's a classic way that many people understand it. Although a lot of our texts go the first way. But let's see this approach, and then within this context, I want to talk a few directions of how we understand hell or Gehenna from a Jewish perspective. Okay. Okay.
So when they reclone the dodo bird, which people are thinking about doing because it's genetic material, we're on the way. Is that right?
I'm not saying that this is definitely the way it's going to happen. I'm not saying that I mean it have to happen in a way that will work, where we had to be ready for it as a society. It had to be something that the rabbis would say we could do. And there's a lot of things that would stand in between us and doing that. That might not be the way it'll happen. He's a scientist who's trying to think how it could happen in a logical way to explain it through science. So here's the next approach. This is the classic approach. Okay, 2 stages. This world and the next world, okay? Body and soul, then soul only, right? So those who pass and when we pass, we go to the world of souls. According to Maimonides, that world of souls is a spiritual reality we'll be benefiting from all the spiritual things that we did. Now, the revival of the dead in this approach kind of just like plopped in there. It's not central. The revival of the dead, according to Maimonides, could happen in this world. It could happen in the next world. We don't really understand what it is, and it's not central to this approach. So that sometimes is easier for people to digest, to like not have that be a central component, because then it just kind of works with how many people understand this process. I wanted to bring in the first one just because I feel like you can't not mention that first approach in discussions on this. But let's move forward with this approach. Tanya.
Good question. So I can do my future planning. The revival of the dead is essentially something that's done on a communal basis as opposed to an individual basis.
No, every individual, according to our tradition, that's
That's my question.
yeah, is the revival of the dead communal or individual? It's communal in the sense that Am Yisrael is being revived and coming back to the land of Israel. That's a type of revival of the dead. But on an individual level, it's understood that every individual goes through a stage of revival of the dead. According to Maimonides, which is this approach, we don't understand what it is really, and it's not very central to the whole process. It does provide benefit, provides more reward, and there's other benefits of it. But basically it's not central to the approach. So we're going to continue with that approach just so we can explain things in a clear way as we go along. Okay. We have a few approaches, a few things I want to show you.
I'm sorry for interrupting, but is this only applying to Jews? And I've been asked that question.
So we talked about last class, you said that non-Jews also can have a place in the world to come. There's discussions if they have revival of the dead or not. But non-Jewish individuals who guard the seven and go to heaven, they do the 7 commandments that they're obligated in, and they're good people. They build themselves a portion as well. Okay. We talked about the dogs too, animals. Okay. The debate. Okay. You have to go back to that recording. All right. So this approach. I'm going to kind of go, maybe not actually go so deep into these texts, but this is Maimonides. He says individuals who return to their bodies will eat, drink, marry, and procreate, and they will die after a long life, like those who will live during the Messianic age. It will happen in the lifetime of the Messiah, or before or after he dies. So basically, he's just putting it in wherever, because it's not central to his approach. I don't think it worked very well with his way of understanding this process. Like the individual's real essence is the soul, so the soul should just continue, and so he has to make place for it. So he made a place for it, and many explain like what the benefits are of it for his approach, but we're not going to get so much into them. Here's like this talks about how it might be how it could be beneficial, but I'm not going to go deep into that right now. So here's a summary here's some pros and cons. It aligns with many people's intuitive understanding. It can align a bit more with logic. The end game isn't a miracle, right? The last stage is not miraculous. It's like the soul and just the soul alone. Hashem's a spiritual being. So if our souls are going to continue, they'll continue forever. They'll be spiritual too. That seems like somewhat logical. The difficulty with this, it downplays the revival of the dead. And also the view of myself, the self doesn't align with how I currently experience myself. Like, I don't know what that means to be just a soul, but anyway. All right. So here's a summary of the approach. What?
Did we discuss that we'll be reunited with our family?
Yeah. So I don't know how that works exactly. Like according to Ken, let me just show you this, and I'll answer that based on this slide here. Here's the slide. So according to this slide, everybody agrees again, there's a soul world, right? This view just says there's a stage afterwards. Okay. So everybody agrees that when our souls pass to the next world, they're in a soul world. Now we also believe that there's other souls there as well. How the interactions happen, I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I don't know about that really. But we do believe that that the souls continue to live, and we do have interface with them in this world. So I imagine there's some type of connection. Maybe in this approach, when they come back in the body, there'll be even more of a connection. So there's a connection. I would imagine that there's a connection. I don't know how it works exactly.
When you find out, will you let us know?
Hopefully not soon.
That's 24 hours.
All right. So let me Okay, so let me pause for a moment. Oh, we have this a little bit. All right, so I wanna feel that we have like 8 or 10 more minutes. I want to jump into the next topic. I know a lot of people have like probably a lot of questions and things going around in your mind. That's good. We'll have to address that at the end of class or maybe like next class or whatever. But I want to jump into this to the next approach, next topic, which is Gehenna or hell. Okay, so again, we described heaven. We described how you get into heaven. I expanded that beyond Torah Mitzvot. Obviously, that's the central way. Torah Mitzvot. You go back to our first class with the Tzimtzum, that attaches you to the line that goes into the vacated space. Another direction is to see God in everything, which connects you to that space all around in the Tzimtzum model, if you remember that. We also talked about how manifesting your true self, I believe, can be a way to connect you to the next world. Because when you do that, you bring out your soul. And we talked about Torah Mitzvah, being a good person overall. And we talked now about like what happens afterwards with the soul. We said that there's 2 approaches to that. That's the reward. Now let's talk about the punishment. I want to preface that by saying Judaism is different than Christianity in this sense, like classic Catholic theology, in that we don't believe that Gehenna or hell is forever. We don't believe in eternal damnation. We do believe that individuals who have sullied their soul so much that their soul is so dark that they don't have any like really of it left, like Hitler or other very evil people. For them, that does exist because they don't have any spirituality left or whatever. Like we believe that there is eternal damnation for very evil doers. But overall, as a general principle, we believe everybody has a portion of the world to come. That's a general principle. And everybody, based on your actions, you can elevate yourself. Now, but we also believe that everybody does go through a stage before they get to the soul world called a transitional period called Gehenna or hell. That can only last, according to our tradition, up to 12 months for a very evil person. Okay, we do Kaddish for how many months? 11 months. Because we're saying our loved one is not a very evil person. That's why we do that. That's why we stop a month before the 12. We're saying that Gehenna is for the evildoers 12 months. Our loved one is not in that category. We're only doing it for 11 months. That's actually why we do that. So what is this judgment and what's the purpose of it? Like, is God like God's like waiting, like, I don't know, it's like a child where somebody hit them and they're waiting to hit them back or something like that. Is God getting revenge against us? Obviously, in my head, it's obviously not that. So what is it? So number one, I don't think God's taking revenge. It could be that there's an element of justice going on, like a judgment. But I want to offer you a few other approaches that are offered to understand this. The central one, I'll just say it outside, is that in order for us to get to the next world, to the world of souls, we have to do some preparation, right? So like we live in this world as a soul with a body. And so that entails, like, we're trying our best to be spiritual. You know, you come to my class, you learn Torah, you make a bracha over the food, whatever we do, we can, but we don't know what it's like to be a soul without a body. And so that, and we may have done wrong things throughout our life. So in order for us to be pure and to get into the pure world, which is the world of the souls, you need a stage of purification. And that is really the essential way of understanding Gehenna or hell. Like, it's not necessarily that there is judgment. There's divine judgment. I'm not denying that. I'm saying, but it's not that God is like vengeful and upset with us in some way and God's taking it out on us. It's more like judgment or a purification stage in order to prepare us so we can go into that spiritual world. It's like, let's say somebody trekked for miles to get to the palace of the king or the queen. And they're dirty, they're sweaty, they smell, and they knock on the door. I'm finally here. After 120 years, I worked really hard to get here. Let me in. Wait, buddy, relax. Take a shower, get dressed, get a haircut, prepare yourself, and so that you'll be properly prepared so you can enter into the palace. And so that's how it's understood. Now, it's not enjoyable. It's not like an enjoyable shower. You know, it's not an enjoyable experience. We're gonna have to understand what the struggles are there. Like, why is there a struggle? God could just prepare us in a way that doesn't include struggle. So what is it? Our tradition does mention fire, but it's not necessarily like the burning physical fire that's described in like other religions. It's a certain purifying fire. So let's try to understand why that preparation stage entails some suffering. Okay. Let's just hold on for a minute.
Yes?
Is it almost like a parent who, when a child has done something wrong?
Can you speak a little bit louder so they can hear?
Is it almost like with a parent, when a child has done something wrong, there's a consequence, so there's punishment, so there's some time, there's time for purification, right, to become better, and
Yeah,
is.
that's how this approach would explain that. Yeah. So I want to show you a few models of understanding. If you allow me to go to 805, that'd be good. Okay.
806.
Oh, yeah, true. We got locked out of heaven for a bit there. So, all right. So here's just an important text that I wanted to show you before we get into the different understandings of hell, like what that suffering is. This approach is it basically says that a lot. There's two approaches to like. I'm not going to go so deep into this. Actually, I'm going to wait on that. Okay, let's jump into the next text. So this is going to take a little while. Okay, let me go to the next one. Okay, the first approach is what I mentioned. That Gehenna is spiritual cleansing. Now, why do I need that cleansing? This is from Derech Hashem, the same book that we were quoting before. Okay, he says, His kindness may be blessed, also to increase salvation for people, that there be another type of purging for whoever purging is possible. The first type was suffering in this world. That's the type of purging. Meaning for one in whom evil was very strong, but not so much so that his verdict you have to have him completely perish. And that is a group of punishments, the most note of which is judgment in Gehenna, purgatory. And the intent of it is to punish the sinner according to his sins in such a way that after his punishment, he has no more liability for the evil act that he did, so that he be able to receive the true reward afterwards, according to his remaining good deeds. And according to this, it comes out that those that perish will be scant and not abundant. For behold, there will only be those in which the measure of evil became so great as to be impossible in any way that a place be found for them to remain for true repayment and eternal enjoyment. I mean, there's these individuals who are in such bad shape that they can't be repaired. But overall, the process of going to Gehenna is to clarify, is to purify us, to elevate us, and to help us remove like our connection to the body. I'm going to show you in a moment, and other types of sins that we've done. Okay, so let me show you. That's one model. So it's a spiritual cleansing. Here's a.
You know, we mostly think of hell as negative. This is not negative.
Well, hell is. So we're going to see why it could be negative. Okay, you're correct. This is kind of like a neutral description of it. Here's two more models which depict a negative aspect of it. Okay. Here's model number 2, life review. Okay, so this isn't necessarily cleansing per se, but this is a natural outcome of being in heaven where everything is known. Once you enter into heaven and everything is known, just make this bigger so you can meet everything. Once you get into heaven and you're in a place where I'm not going to read that slide, but once you get into heaven and you're in a place where God's infinite knowledge is manifest, and your soul leaves the body and it enters into that web of knowledge, you start to know a lot of things. You start to see things for what they really are. It's easy in this world to delude oneself into thinking that truth is a certain way. When you get to the world of truth, then you're faced with a lot of truths. So some explain that that is Gehenna. When you get there, you're going to be happy with all the good things you did. But when you get there also, there's a stage where you see all the wrong things that you did and you feel bad about it. Right? So how is there emotion or shame there? I don't know, because it's a spiritual state. But that's how it's many times explained. Like this is a text from the Gemara, where they asked you questions in the next world, right? Did you conduct business faithfully? Did you designate times for Torah study? Did you engage in procreation? Did you await salvation? We can understand these not as questions that some judge is asking us with a voice of some whoever, who's the voice that's usually used for God? What's his name? Morgan Freeman's voice or whatever. It's not that, okay? But rather, you're asking yourself these questions because you're able to see your soul for what you really did. And there's this type of assessment, a life review. And that can be painful, that can be scary. The good thing about it is that like any tough thing, time can heal wounds. And so that's the idea, that Gehenom is for a specific period, because that's the time when you see that the most. Like the initial stage where you go into the other world and you see all these things for what they are, that shame and that confusion and that like disturbance, that is the initial stages of your afterlife experience. And so that's the most difficult time you'll experience in the very beginning. So Rabbi Aryeh Kaplan explains that a little bit in this text, which you won't have time to read.
You have
But-
Morgan Freeman in that picture.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's what-
And I had this other movie. If we had time, there's a movie called Defending Your Life. Anybody ever seen
Yeah.
that? So there's also like they go to heaven and like he's in a court. So I actually linked to that here. You can find it if you. I send out the PowerPoint each time. It's a good movie. You should watch it actually if you get a chance. It's a nice movie. It's an older movie, Defending Your Life. So he says like this: we are taught that the judgment of the wicked lasts 12 months. Even the naked soul can gradually learn to live with his shame and forget it, and the pain eventually subsides. So that is how Gehenom or hell is like a temporary situation, because eventually that pain subsides. But the initial pain around it is very difficult. And that's a way we can understand those questions that are asked when you get to the next world. So he says like this, it may be more than coincidence that 12 months is also the length of the time required for something to be forgotten in Talmudic law. Thus one mourns a parent for 12 months. It says a special blessing upon seeing a close friend after this period of time. Okay, so that's a little bit. That's this approach. The final approach is that I want to show you is weaning off the body. Okay, and I'll just explain this on the outside. You can look at it on the inside. So our tradition says that when we get to the next world, our soul is very used to being in a body. It's very connected to the body. And so especially in the first days, that's why we do so many things. Like we have so many traditions around the body. We're careful with autopsies to not do autopsies because it also disturbs the soul to see the body having done an autopsy upon it. Similarly, we mourn in the house of mourning. Some say you're mourning with the soul, because the soul is like missing the body. And our tradition says the soul hovers like the first 3 days, the 30 days, even the first year. It's closer, it gets further and further away as the soul kind of gets reunited into the spiritual realm. And so some explain that that's the temporary pain that's experienced when you get to the next world. If the individual is completely embedded in the body, and I'm not talking just about like, eating Twix or ice cream every night. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the way we think, coarse character traits. It's a lot of levels of physicality or materialism. I'm talking about like being obsessed with materialism or thinking in a non-spiritual way, not in a way of giving, but a way of taking. All those directions are like bodily, are impacted by the body, or are emerge from our connection to our body. The more one lives a spiritual life in this world, the easier the transition will be to the world of the spirit. And that's how we can explain the length of and the intensity of Gehenom. It's an outcome or offshoot of one's being embedded in the body. The more one's deeply connected to the body and the bodily pursuits and the ways of thinking, the modes of thinking of the body, the character traits affiliated with it, and also like being obsessed with amassing wealth. All those engagements are different than what's going to be happening in the next world. So the more we live on a spiritual plane in this world, the easier it will be for us to merge into the world of the spirit afterwards. And so that's another way to explain that stage. So let me just put it all together. Okay, so explain that the next world, we have heaven and hell. Heaven is the world of souls. Some say that's going to be the final stage. The first approach that we saw says that there's going to be revival of the dead. After that, we explained a little bit how the revival of the dead could work based on science, based on Rabbi Aryeh Kaplan. Then we moved to this idea of hell, Gehenom. And we explained that it's not permanent, it's temporary. And we explained that on three fronts. One is that it's a type of cleansing to prepare us for the next world. And so we don't need to be cleansed for it. You're cleansed for 12, however much you need to be cleansed, God does that for you. It's a spiritual cleansing. I don't know exactly how that works. That's one approach. That's kind of like God doing it. Another approach is that it's an extension of where we were in this world. So what we did in this world, we get to the next world, we're going to see that because we're in the world where everything's known. It's the world of truth. And that's one approach. Another approach is that the more we're connected to the body, the more difficult it'll be for us to detach from it. In the next one, that will be the struggles that we experience prior to going into the world of souls. So we started with speaking about like what is the essence of the individual. Some say the essence is our body and soul. That's why the body and soul in the end will live forever together. Others say our essence is our soul, and that's why the soul will live alone forever. Either way you take it, there's both approaches, and all these approaches hold that there is an afterlife, and that we have to do our best in this world to prepare ourselves for that. We spoke last class that this world is also very important to elevate and fix, and so those are the two things we need to focus on: making this world great, and also trying to elevate ourselves so that we're fitting to go into the next world. We're on that high spiritual level.